My name is Rachel Myers. I'm 34 years old, and until a few months ago, I thought I had finally found peace in the little house I worked years to afford. If you like real stories where the truth eventually wins, no matter how dark the lie, stick around, hit the like button, and subscribe. This one gets real. It started with a crack. I noticed it one chilly morning in early March while letting my dog Murphy out into the backyard. He bounded out like he always did, tail wagging, nose to the ground. That's when I saw it, a thin, jagged line running down one of the wooden planks on the east fence, the one that bordered Gary Simmons' yard. It wasn't big, just a splinter, really. But something about it felt deliberate. Not like natural wear. Like pressure had been applied, carefully, intentionally. I bent down for a closer look. The wood had splintered inward, not out, like something had hit it from Gary's side. But I brushed it off. Maybe it was just the winter frost doing weird things to the wood. Old fences creak, warp, decay. It happens. Gary was in his mid-60s, retired, and the type of man who gave off the energy of someone who didn't just notice things. He recorded them in mental spreadsheets. His lawn was trimmed so precisely, it could have passed for artificial turf. He swept his driveway every morning, even if there wasn't a leaf in sight. Every time I walked past his house, I felt his gaze from behind those beige curtains. The blinds would twitch, just a little, then fall still. When I moved into the neighborhood 2 years ago, I was relieved to finally have a place of my own. After years of roommates, bad landlords, and one very messy breakup, I bought this modest, 2-bedroom home with every penny I'd saved. I loved the quiet, the safety, the idea that I finally had control over my life. And in those first months, Gary was just a quiet neighbor, nothing more. We didn't talk much, and that was fine by me. I'd nod when I saw him at the mailbox. He'd wave, sort of. It was a silent agreement. Stay out of each other's way. But that started to change in subtle ways. First, there was the note. It was taped to my mailbox with a single piece of scotch. Tape, neat, centered, the handwriting blocky and precise. Please keep your dog quiet after 9 p.m. Some of us value our sleep. I stared at it for a long time. Murphy wasn't a noisy dog. He barked occasionally at squirrels or delivery drivers, sure, but never for long, and certainly not late at night. Still, I took it seriously. I bought a white noise machine for him. I started taking him on longer walks in the evening to tire him out. I even bought him a new chew toy. Then, a week later, came the knock on my door. Gary stood there with his arms crossed, his mouth pressed into a flat line. "Did you know your tree is shedding leaves onto my lawn?" I blinked. It's a tree. It sheds leaves. That's what it does." He didn't smile. "Some people take care of their yards. Some people let theirs bleed onto their neighbors. Just saying." Before I could even respond, he turned and walked off. I remember standing in the doorway, stunned. Who complains about leaves? It was spring. The trees were just coming back to life. There weren't even that many on his side. From then on, it felt like Gary was everywhere. Watching, monitoring, judging. If Murphy barked even once, I'd hear a sigh or a mutter from the other side of the fence. If I parked slightly too close to the property line, Gary would appear minutes later, tape, measure in hand, inspecting the distance. At first, I thought I was being paranoid. I even laughed about it to a friend on the phone, calling him neighborhood dad with too much time on his hands. But somewhere in my gut, I felt it. That sensation you get when the air shifts in a room and you're not sure why. Something was changing, and that crack in the fence? It was just the beginning. It was a Thursday, and I remember it vividly because it had been one of those long, dragging work days where everything feels slightly off. Traffic was worse than usual. My phone had died right before I needed directions, and when I finally turned onto my street, all I wanted was to put on sweatpants and microwave some leftovers. Instead, I was greeted by flashing red and blue lights. A police cruiser was parked diagonally across the road, lights spinning silently, creating a surreal kaleidoscope against the neighboring houses. I slowed to a stop, confused, heart beginning to beat a little faster. Murphy stirred in the back seat, sensing my tension. I parked in my driveway and got out. A young officer, maybe early 30s, buzz cut, polite posture, approached me with a clipboard. His name tag read, Lopez. "Ma'am," he began cautiously, "your neighbor reported vandalism." My eyes flicked past him to Gary's yard. Gary was standing by his front walkway, arms crossed, lips pursed into a tight line of theatrical disappointment. At his feet lay a solar garden light, broken and half buried in the grass. Behind him, on the side of his white garage, thick red streaks dripped down the vinyl siding in chaotic zigzag patterns. It looked like someone had hurled paint from a bucket while blindfolded. Then Gary raised his hand and pointed, straight, at me. "She did it." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, nothing about it was funny, but because the accusation was so outrageous it short-circuited my brain. "Are you serious?" I said, turning to Officer Lopez. He didn't look amused. "I'm just here to take statements. Mr. Simmons claims there have been ongoing tensions between you two. He said this morning you were outside near the fence. Said he heard voices, angry ones." I blinked. "Voices? It's a neighborhood. People talk. That doesn't mean anything." I wasn't angry this morning. I'd let Murphy out, refilled the bird feeder, then left for work. That was it. And I certainly hadn't thrown paint on a garage or smashed a lawn light. The whole situation was absurd. I turned to Gary. "I didn't do this. And if you think I did, you're dead wrong." He met my gaze with an eerie kind of calm. That smug, satisfied little smile crept across his face like it had been waiting there all day. Like this was a game he was winning. "I've already installed cameras," he said quietly, almost like he was talking to himself. "Won't be long before the truth comes out." Officer Lopez made a note on his clipboard. "There's no evidence yet. I'll file the report, and we'll follow up if needed. For now, just keep things civil." Gary nodded like a model citizen. I just stood there, stunned. When the officers finally left and Gary went back inside, I remained frozen on my porch, keys in hand. The sky had dimmed to that soft gray that warns of a storm. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves that Gary hated so much. I wanted to scream. But instead, I went inside, locked the door behind me, and sat on the living room floor with Murphy curled up beside me, confused and alert. He could tell something was wrong. My hands were shaking. Not out of fear, out of fury. Being accused of something you didn't do does something strange to your brain. It makes you question your own memory, your own sanity. Did I walk by his house that morning? Did I say something that could be twisted? No, I hadn't. I knew that. This wasn't about vandalism. This was Gary escalating. He didn't want an apology. He didn't want peace. He wanted control, power, to rattle me. And worst of all, he was good at it, because when I lay down that night, every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind against the window made me jump. And I started to wonder, not if Gary had a camera, but how long he'd been watching, really watching, and what he might try next. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where the sky hangs low with a soft blue haze and birdsong feels like a soundtrack on repeat. I had decided to spend the morning working in the garden, just some weeding, trimming the rosemary bush, mindless things to calm my nerves. After everything that had happened with the paint incident and the police, I was craving normalcy, or at least the illusion of it. Murphy dozed lazily near the flower bed, paws twitching in his sleep. I was kneeling by the eastern fence, gloves. Dirty, sweat on my back when I saw it. A glint, just a flicker of light like the sun had caught on something buried in the thick hedge of boxwood shrubs that ran along the property line. At first, I thought it might be a shard of broken glass or a soda can someone had tossed in, but then I parted the branches and froze. It was a camera. Tiny, square, nestled so deeply in the greenery it could have gone completely unnoticed unless you were looking from exactly the right angle. There was even camouflage tape wrapped around the casing to blend it in with the foliage. A blinking red dot in the corner told me it was live, active, and it was aimed directly at my back porch. For a full minute, I just knelt there, staring at it. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My thoughts scrambled like someone had dropped a stack of index cards in my head. There was no question about it. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't leftover from a previous homeowner or part of some home security system. This was deliberate, and it wasn't mine. I pulled off my gloves, hands trembling slightly, and stood. My mind was racing. Had it been there during the vandalism? During my morning routines? When I was reading outside in my robe? That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak in the walls sounded like footsteps. Every shadow that shifted felt alive. I taped over the windows with dark paper and duct tape, even the small ones in the bathroom. I unplugged my smart speakers. I started checking the locks 3-4 times before bed, pulling on the doorknobs until they rattled. Murphy, usually, calm and content, had started pacing the house too, ears perked. I didn't feel like I was living in my home anymore. I felt like I was on stage, so I started digging. Not literally, not yet, but online. Forums, legal blogs, neighborhood watch, sites. I needed to know, was this even legal? Turns out it's a gray area. If the camera is on someone's property and pointed at an area where you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy, like a backyard visible through a fence, it's often allowed, even if it feels wrong. But that didn't sit right with me. I zoomed out on Google Maps, measured the hedge line. The camera was right on the border. Technically, I think it was on his side, but just barely. And that hedge? I trimmed it. I watered it. It was mine as much as his. I even found an old survey from when I moved in that suggested the property line might be slightly in my favor. I printed everything. Then I looked up Gary. No social media. Of course. But there was a listing from a community newsletter from 5 years ago. He'd won an HOA award for Yard of the Month. A photo showed him holding a plaque, grinning. Same smug expression I saw on his face the night he accused me. Another post mentioned his time in the Navy. Things started to click into place, his rigid routine, the binoculars by the window I'd once caught a glimpse of. The laminated neighborhood, rules, sheet taped to the inside of his garage. Gary didn't just want order, he wanted control of his property, of the neighborhood, of me. I wasn't a neighbor to him. I was an intruder, and I was done playing nice. 2 weeks passed, but the tension in the air didn't ease. If anything, it thickened. I barely slept, always half listening for any sound outside, always feeling watched. The camera was still there, nestled in the hedge, and though I thought about removing it, I hesitated. What if it was evidence? What if I needed it? The thought that Gary might be spying on me every day, watching my comings and goings, filled me with a cold unease. Then, one late afternoon, just as I was about to step out for a quick walk with Murphy, there was a sharp, insistent knocking on my front door. I opened it to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. Their expressions were serious, professional, but with an undercurrent of something else. Maybe suspicion, or weariness. I could feel my heart jump. "Ma'am," one of them began, clipboard in hand. "We received footage from a security camera showing someone vandalizing Mr. Simmons's property late last night. We need you to come down to the station and answer a few questions." My stomach sank. I swallowed hard, but nodded. There was no use denying them the chance to speak here on my doorstep. They were already involved, and this was serious. At the station, they led me into a small, cold interview room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, making everything feel harsher. One officer plugged a USB into a computer and played the footage. The video was grainy and dark. The streetlights cast long, shifting shadows, and the figure's face was hidden by the hood of their sweatshirt. But the movements were clear. The figure bent down, grabbed a can of red spray paint, and slathered thick streaks across the side. Gate of Gary's garage. I sat frozen, eyes glued to the screen. It was late. The hooded figure was roughly my height, my build. The gait, the way the figure walked, was close to mine, but not exact. Not quite. My voice cracked as I finally spoke. "That's not me. Look at the way they walk. Their gait is off. I'm more deliberate. They're moving differently." The officers exchanged glances. One sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Ma'am, we're not pressing charges at this time, but the neighbor insists he wants this investigated fully. We just want to be thorough." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Of course, but I swear I didn't do this." They handed me a card. "We'd like you to stay in town and be available for follow-up questions." I left the station feeling shaken, hollowed out. It wasn't just that I was accused. It was the humiliation, the feeling of being watched and targeted, of being cornered. Gary had gone too far. This wasn't just about a few paint streaks or a broken solar light anymore. This was a battle, one he was waging silently but fiercely, and I was trapped in the middle. I looked at my reflection in the car window on the way home, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. How had things spiraled so fast? How did a simple neighborly dispute turn into something that felt like a war? That night, as Murphy curled at my feet, I realized I needed to take control. I couldn't let fear dictate my life. Not anymore. Gary thought he had power over me, but I was about to prove him wrong. After the police visit, the paranoia only deepened. I couldn't shake the feeling that Gary was orchestrating everything, building a case against me piece by piece. But all I had were accusations and shadows. No real proof. So I reached out to Matt. He was an old friend from college, someone I trusted, someone who understood tech far better than I ever would. Matt had carved out a niche in IT security over the years, working on cyber investigations and digital forensics. If anyone could find a crack in Gary's digital facade, it was him. I explained everything: the broken solar light, the red paint, the camera in the hedge, the police footage. Matt listened quietly, then said, "Send me whatever you have. Every video, every file. I'll take a look." Over the next few days, I gathered every scrap of footage from the cameras I could find. My own security cameras, the small camera hidden in the hedge, and even the clips the police had shown me. I emailed everything to Matt and waited, biting my nails. When he finally called back, I was pacing in my living room. His voice was low but urgent. "Rachel, you were right to be suspicious. This isn't just random vandalism or neighborly feud stuff. This is calculated." I felt a flicker of hope. Matt went on. "Look at the timestamps on the hedge camera. See how the angles shift? That means someone moved the camera, manually. He repositioned it to get specific shots." I frowned, picturing the small camera tucked into the hedge, just far enough to avoid easy detection but close enough to capture my back porch. "But that's not all," Matt added. "We found edits, weird cuts in the footage, missing seconds here and there. Someone is trimming these videos to make the evidence look a certain way." My pulse quickened. He was framing me, staging these incidents to make me look guilty. "Gary's trying to trap you," Matt said quietly. "This isn't just passive-aggressive behavior anymore. It's a setup." I leaned against the kitchen counter, the weight of it settling over me. It made sense. The note on my mailbox, the complaints, the accusations, they were all pieces of a carefully crafted puzzle, and I was the scapegoat. But now I had something, a lead, something more than just gut feeling. I had digital proof that someone was manipulating the situation. Still, it wasn't enough for the police, not yet. Matt promised to keep digging, to analyze everything more thoroughly, to see if we could uncover the source of the footage edits, maybe even catch who was moving the cameras. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of determination. I wasn't just a victim, I was fighting back. I thought about Murphy, wagging his tail as if nothing was wrong, and felt a fierce protective urge. I wouldn't let Gary's petty vendetta ruin my life, not without a fight, but as the days passed, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Gary was clever, careful, and he had the advantage of proximity and time. Still, I had something he didn't. The truth on my side, and Matt. Together, maybe we could expose the cracks in Gary's perfect little fence. By the time I decided to take matters into my own hands, I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and desperate for answers. The feeling of being watched, judged, and framed was suffocating. But sitting back and letting Gary play his twisted game wasn't an option anymore. I needed evidence, solid proof. So, I bought 3 small, motion-activated cameras, the kind you barely notice, silent and discreet. Nothing flashy, nothing bulky, just enough to catch whoever was lurking around my property at odd hours. One camera went inside an old birdhouse on my back porch. It blended in perfectly with the chipped paint and the worn wood. Another I tucked behind the recycling bins near the side gate, out of direct sight, but with a clear view of the fence line. The third I rigged up in the gutter above the garage, angled just right to face Gary's yard. For weeks, I didn't get a single alert. Nothing. No movement, no suspicious activity. It was almost like the cameras were useless, or worse. Maybe Gary had caught on and stopped. I tried not to let my hopes deflate. Patience was the only weapon I had left. Then one night, around 3:14 a.m., my phone buzzed with emotion. Alert. My heart jumped. I grabbed my phone and quickly pulled up the footage. There he was, Gary. The hood of his jacket was pulled up, shadowing most of his face. He was carrying a can of spray paint in one hand, moving stealthily along the edge of his garage wall. The same wall that had been vandalized weeks before. For a moment, I felt a sick mix of triumph and fear. Finally, the proof I needed. But then, he tripped. A small rock, barely visible in the dark, caught his foot. His stumble was clumsy, and as he fell forward, his hood slipped back. The camera caught his face in perfect clarity. It was unmistakable. The man I'd dealt with all this time. The man who'd been accusing me. The man trying to ruin my life. Gary, caught red-handed. I watched the video over and over, freezing the frame on his face each time. His eyes narrowed, his mouth set, in a stubborn line. The pride he had shown in the police station, the casual smile he'd given me, none of it matched this scared, sloppy version of him. In that moment, I knew I had the upper hand, but I also knew I had to be careful. Confronting him directly might backfire. Gary wasn't just vindictive, he was unpredictable. I started backing up the footage on multiple devices, sending copies to Matt, and planning my next move. The evidence was clear. No more doubts, no more, he said, she said. For the first time in weeks, I slept with a little less fear. But I also realized this was far from over. Gary might have lost the battle tonight, but the war, that was still ahead. After reviewing the footage countless times, making sure every detail was clear and undeniable, I knew I had to act. This wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about stopping Gary from turning my life into a nightmare. The next morning, I sent the footage to the precinct. I didn't just email it, I made sure to CC the neighborhood HOA, and I also attached the clips to a formal complaint that my lawyer helped me draft. The letter was straightforward but firm. I was being harassed, falsely accused, and now I had undeniable proof that Gary himself was the vandal. It was a relief to hand over the evidence. It felt like reclaiming a piece of my sanity, knowing that this time I wasn't just asking for help, I was demanding it, with hard proof. Within days, Gary was called in for questioning. I didn't expect much at first. He was a retired man, with no prior offenses on his record. But the police were thorough. They played the footage over and over in the interrogation room, watching the way Gary shifted uncomfortably when confronted. No charges were filed yet. The police said they needed more time to investigate. But the HOA wasn't so lenient. They issued him a formal warning for conduct unbecoming of a community member, reminding him that harassment and vandalism could lead to fines or eviction. For the first time in weeks, I started to notice changes in the neighborhood. Gary stopped his obsessive lawn mowing routine. The military precision with which he had kept his grass trimmed was gone, replaced by patches of uncut weeds and dead leaves. And the most telling sign? He stopped staring through his blinds, the twitching curtains and the small movements behind the glass. The way I'd always known he was watching me, those vanished. I heard whispers from other neighbors. Gary was talking about moving, packing up and leaving the neighborhood altogether. Maybe even selling the house. It was a quiet victory, a small crack in the wall he'd built around himself and his bitterness. But even as I felt the tension ease, a small part of me was wary. Gary was a man pushed into a corner, and sometimes, people like that lash out in ways you can't predict. So I stayed vigilant. I kept the cameras rolling, kept my phone close, and made sure every step I took was backed by caution. Because after all this, I wasn't just protecting my property anymore. I was protecting my peace of mind, and that's something worth fighting for. After the storm had passed, my world began to calm down. The flashing red and blue lights outside my door became a distant memory. No more knocks from police officers or the uneasy glances from neighbors who seemed to sense the tension, but didn't know the full story. The strange notes stopped appearing on my mailbox. The unsolicited complaints ceased, and for the first time in months, I felt a fragile peace settle over my home. But even as everything seemed quiet again, I didn't rush to dismantle my security. I didn't take down the cameras. Not because I was still scared, or because I felt threatened every single moment, though part of me always stayed alert, but because I had learned something invaluable through this ordeal. I had learned exactly what people were capable of when they thought no one was watching. Gary had taught me that lesson. The way a neighbor, someone you live next to and might pass on the sidewalk with a polite nod, could slowly turn hostile. How bitterness and suspicion could twist someone's mind, pushing them to lie, to manipulate, to sabotage, to invade your privacy in the quiet hours of the night, thinking they'd never be caught. I realized how easy it was to be caught off guard, how quickly trust could be broken, and how important it was to be prepared, not just physically, but mentally. So the cameras stayed. The birdhouse camera, the one hidden by the recycling bins, the one tucked up in the gutter. They became silent guardians. They watched the empty yards, the quiet streets, and every shadow that passed. I checked their feeds regularly, but the alerts were rare now. Peace had returned to my little corner of the neighborhood, and with peace came a new kind of strength. I wasn't just surviving this neighborhood drama anymore. I was stronger because of it. I was wiser. I understood that boundaries weren't just about fences and hedges. They were about respect and vigilance. I kept my dog Murphy close, walking him a little longer each evening, enjoying the calm that followed the chaos. The sun set gently over my backyard, casting long shadows over the now repaired fence, the one that had cracked at the very start of this nightmare. That crack wasn't just a broken piece of wood anymore. It was a reminder that even when things seem calm, you have to keep your eyes open, because sometimes the quiet is just the calm before the storm. But now, I was ready.